There are apartments where people move in with hopes for a new life. But sometimes that new life turns into a real nightmare. When I first saw this apartment, it seemed like an unbelievably generous gift. A spacious living room, freshly painted walls, almost new furniture without dents or scratches. The agent, a dry woman named Mary, kept her hands on the folder and spoke matter-of-factly, as if she didn't notice my surprise. The price was almost half the market value. To my cautious why, she replied briefly, "The owner is in a hurry." I nodded, walked around the kitchen where chrome handles sparkled under the lamp, and caught myself thinking a simple, childish thought. Finally, I'm lucky. The house was located in a quiet neighborhood in southeast Portland between two parallel streets. The entrance was clean, the tiles were intact, and the mailboxes bore neat names. On my first day, I went up to my third-floor apartment, looked around the hallway, and noticed something strange. Several neighbors I met on my way to the door avoided me, almost with fear. I smiled at everyone, but in response I saw only brief nods and perfunctory hellos, after which they quickly disappeared behind the doors of their apartments. An elderly man with a newspaper under his arm, I met him at the stairs, lingered on my key, and without raising his head whispered, "You won't be here long." He pretended he wasn't talking to me but to the wall and walked past as if he urgently needed to catch the evening news. His words stuck in my head, but I dismissed them. New home, new people. In the evening, I opened my laptop and drafted an invitation to a small get-together. Tea, pizza, a couple of pies from the nearest bakery, no alcohol and no loud music. I printed out the flyers and hung them by the elevator and on the bulletin board. At the appointed time, I put mugs on the table, heated up the kettle, and turned on the soft light of the floor lamp. The minutes ticked by, the kettle cooled, and the pizza got cold under the lid. No one came. Not a single person knocked on the door or sent a text message to the number I had written on the leaflet. I walked around the apartment, turned off the lights in the kitchen, drew the curtains, and told myself aloud that it was normal. Everyone was busy. I slept restlessly that first night. Someone was quietly moving around behind the wall, and I heard clear, confident footsteps in the hallway. Not hurried, not dragging, but confident, like someone walking toward a familiar door. When I looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. A strip of light from the emergency lamp divided the carpet into warm and cold halves. There were no footsteps. I returned to bed, and at that moment the light in the bedroom flickered, strangely as if there had been a power surge, and then went out, as if someone had turned it off with a normal click. I lay there listening to the electricity humming in the walls. In the morning, everything was as usual. The sink gleamed in the kitchen, and the living room smelled of new wood. I chalked up the night's oddities to adjustment. In the afternoon, I bought a couple of plates, glasses, curtains, and towels. In the evening, when the gray sky hung over the houses, I turned on the TV to have some program playing in the background. The TV switched itself to snow, white and black noise, and from there, through the interference, for a second it seemed like some kind of whisper. I picked up the remote and started pressing the channel buttons, but all the channels were snowy. After a minute, everything fixed itself. On the third day, my neighbor from apartment 6, a young man in a sweatshirt, met me at the elevator and took a step back, even though we had barely brushed shoulders. He moved away so abruptly it was as if I had suddenly sneezed right in his face. "Hey, I'm new here," I said. "You'd better move out," he said dryly without looking at me. "I'm serious," he added dryly. He entered the elevator, pressed the button, and the elevator started moving, leaving me puzzled in my reflection on the steel surface of the elevator doors. I went to the stairs. When I went outside, I met our technician. Short, slightly stooped. He was fixing the handle on the utility room door. His badge said Luis. I asked about the electricity and he looked up. His eyes were large and honest, like those of a man who cannot lie but knows how to keep quiet. "The wiring here is new," he said and paused before adding, "Yours definitely is." "Then why?" I hesitated. "The lights behave strangely at night. The TV hisses." Lewis looked over my head at the gray clouds and said quietly, "There have been a couple of incidents here. I don't know if I should tell you. Several tenants have died in your apartment." The corner of my mouth twitched. "What happened? Accidents? Murder?" "Officially cardiac arrest. Different people. According to the records, no connection between them. One..." He paused. "One disappeared. Just vanished." "Do you really think..." I wanted to finish with that it has something to do with the apartment, but I didn't dare. "After the second incident in this apartment, no one wanted to live there, only visitors," said Louis. "Who don't know..." He wiped his hands on a rag, nodded to me, and went into the back room without closing the door completely. Now I knew why the price was lower, and why people turned away. After the conversation, I became more attentive. Every object in the apartment took on a subtle before and after. On the third evening, I found shards of glass on the floor, even though I remembered putting the glass in the dishwasher. "The cat," I thought, and the silence of the apartment answered me with an empty echo. I didn't have a cat. I always walked quickly past the mirror in the hallway. At first, it was simply because it was colder there. The wind found a crack somewhere near the window at the end of the corridor. But then there was another reason. A couple of times, glancing at my reflection, I noticed what looked like an extra vertical shadow in the depths of the mirrored room, not matching the door jambs. For a split second, it seemed like someone was standing behind me. Then it was gone. At such moments, my heart would tighten and my fingers would become dry. To distract myself, I decided to sort through the remaining boxes in the storage room. In the far corner, behind a mop and an empty microwave box, I found an old digital camera. It was small, with a matte body and a worn rubber grip where the thumb would rest. The power cord was lying nearby. The camera wouldn't turn on. The battery was dead. I plugged it into my extension cord to charge and wiped the lens with a rag just in case. "I'll take a look later. Maybe there's something interesting there," I thought, and put it aside for the evening. At night, the light went out again in the small room that I hardly ever used. It didn't just go out. It seemed to flicker, retreat into the lamp, and then disappear. At that moment, the TV in the living room turned on by itself. There was a dull thud, and the screen went grainy. I went back, pressed the button. The sound didn't turn off, and a shiver ran through my whole body. I heard footsteps in the hallway and then a slight creak at my door, as if someone had approached the door and frozen. In the morning, I went to work and caught myself thinking that I didn't want to go back. The house that had seemed like a refuge 2 days ago now stood somewhere inside my consciousness like a black square without windows. When I returned, I found the camera charging and tried to turn it on. The screen flashed and lit up. A confusing menu, old dates. The last recording had no name, only a number. I sat down on the floor by the wall, put the camera on my knees and pressed play. A man appeared on the screen. He was about 35 years old and wearing a gray t-shirt. His face looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, but he didn't look sick. The apartment, my apartment, was visible around him. The same floor lamp, the same kitchen with metal handles, the same mirror in the hallway reflecting the dark window opening. The man spoke quietly, as if afraid of waking someone in the next room. "Today again," he said and licked his dry lips. "The light and the footsteps. I thought someone was playing a joke, but no. I checked everything. I hear it." He fell silent, listening. and I involuntarily listened with him even though my room was quiet. "They come to the door and stop," he said. "Always." His breathing quickened. He sat down on the sofa as I sometimes did in the evening and turned the camera toward himself. "I was told that there have been incidents here," he said the word cautiously as if tasting it. "Cardiac arrest. But it doesn't just stop for no reason, it stops because of something." He fell silent and I felt the air in my room begin to thicken like syrup before it boils. The sound of the recording became thinner, as if someone had quietly turned down the bass. I caught myself sitting in the semi-darkness. The sunset had fallen behind the rooftops and the light from the window had turned a deadly gray. I didn't turn on the lamp. Louis's words floated into my head like a marker pen mark. "Only visitors. Those who don't know." The man on the screen suddenly raised his head and listened. His gaze went somewhere to the right of the camera, where my front door was now. He leaned forward and whispered, "Footsteps." I pressed stop and turned around. It was quiet outside the door. I pressed play again. On the recording there were 3 steps. A pause, 2 steps. I already knew this rhythm. The man sat with his fists clenched, the camera shaking from the tension in his hands. He swallowed. "They stopped at the door." At that moment in my apartment on the other side of reality, I heard the exact same thing. 3 steps, pause, 2 steps. I propped myself up on my elbows. My throat was dry, my pupils seemed to have dilated. I reached for the floor lamp switch. The man on the screen slowly turned his head toward the mirror in the hallway. There in the depths, where the light from the corridor dissolved into shadow, a vertical crease flashed for a split second as if someone were standing behind the frame out of sight. I heard a quiet sigh in the camera and in my room too. 2 sighs, one inside the screen, the other behind my back, almost in sync. In the recording, the man whispered, "I hear footsteps behind me." I didn't turn off the camera. I felt the back of my neck grow cold, the skin on my shoulders tighten and become thick. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my reflection in the black blank TV screen. A dark shoulder, a motionless neck, and behind my figure, a shadow. "This is ridiculous," I said into the void. I tried to get up, but the void seemed to put its hand on my shoulder, not with its weight, but with its presence. In the camera, the man also got up, as if connected to me by an invisible rope, and the camera, jerked by his hand, cut the image. The sound on the recording floated like a magnetic tape. "If anyone is watching this," he exhaled, "don't sit here in the dark. Don't listen. Leave." He turned at the rustle. The camera shook, grabbing the edge of the mirror, the kitchen pillars, the corner of the window. Everything blurred and became flat. At that moment, I heard a whisper behind me. It was very close, so close that the skin on my ear tingled. The words were indistinct, as if someone were saying my name without opening their mouth. I remembered Louis the technician, his simple phrases, his gaze. I remembered the pizza and tea for the meeting that never happened, the elderly neighbor who whispered, "You won't be here long." And I understood the meaning of those words. Something barely perceptible shifted in my room. Not an object, the air. The corner of the curtain swayed even though the windows were closed. I held my breath. The camera beeped softly, a warning that the battery was low. The recording rippled. The man sat quietly for a second, then slowly turned the camera to where my mirror is now. In the reflection, I saw a silhouette, dark, without details. It wasn't getting closer. It was just there, and it made my chest tighten. "I hear footsteps behind me," the man repeated in the recording. The camera jerked and emitted a short metallic crackle from the speaker. The image jumped closer to the mirror. For a second, the shadow appeared at the edge of the frame, too large, unnaturally elongated. I looked up from the screen. The room was in thick semi-darkness, and every outline became soft and blurred. Behind me, something sighed a second time, a little deeper than before, and again a very quiet whisper. I couldn't make out the words. Maybe my name, maybe don't turn around. My back muscles twitched, my knees went weak. The recording ended with the previous tenant stopping talking, as if his tongue had become heavy, and slowly turning his head without looking at the camera. For a split second, the sound became very clear. I could hear water dripping somewhere in the kitchen, indistinct whispering and heavy breathing growing louder. Then, a sharp click and a black screen. I didn't turn around. I sat there, clutching the camera with the black screen in my hands, and listened. At first, there were slow, heavy footsteps in the hallway, but soon I realized they were coming from the next room, audible through the slightly open door. Closer and closer, clearer and clearer. And with every heartbeat, I caught myself thinking, maybe my neighbor's words, "You won't be here long," weren't a warning, but a sentence. Every camp has its own horror story. In ours, it's the old building that was closed 30 years ago. There were rumors that the youngest groups used to live there, but after the building was deemed unsafe, the children were moved and the wing was closed. Some swore they saw silhouettes in the windows. Others talked about toys still lying on the beds and a diary that still has new entries. The legend passed from group to group, becoming more and more strange and scary. My name is Ethan Morris. I've been on duty at this camp for 2 seasons, spent 2 different summers here, and already know almost all the nighttime sounds in this area. I know what a raccoon sounds like in a trash can, what an automatic machine gun clicks like at the pumping station, and how old wooden buildings creak when the wind picks up. I know how often children hear things that aren't there. I knew, until last night. The old building stretched along the grove like a dark, compressed shadow, low, long, with faded lettering on the pediment from which only the first 2 letters of the camp's name could be made out. The windows were boarded up with plywood, in places oozing with resinous streaks. A chain with a lock dangled from the door, and above it was an old striped "Do Not Enter" tape, faded from the sun. During the day, it was easy for me to believe the fungus theory. At night, no. At first, I convinced myself that the laughter was coming from the lake. It was full of kids who were experiencing freedom for the first time in their lives, sitting on the pier longer than they were supposed to, discussing their idols, talking and laughing so loudly that it could be heard far and wide. But as the nights dragged on, it became clearer that the sound was coming from here, from the closed wing. It was short, abrupt, often nervous, as if someone was covering their mouth with their hand so as not to laugh too loudly. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I handed the keys to the night supervisor, checked the bedrooms of the younger groups, turned off the sprinkler system, and took my mag light, a heavy flashlight that can be used as a sledgehammer. Before going out to the old building, I went into the guardhouse and took the emergency kit from the previous caretaker out of the box. A flat-slotted screwdriver, 2 nail pullers, and a rusty bunch of useless keys. I wasn't going to break the lock. I just wanted to make sure it was really empty, and laughter is the way my fatigue trembles in the night. The grove smelled of heated bark. The air was sticky like the film on a cup of tea. I walked, counting my steps, and at some point realized that this habit of counting was more calming than any safety rule. 37, 38. I stopped at the porch. The chain on the door hung so that the lower ring easily reached the bracket. I crouched down, shone my light on it, and saw a fresh mark on the metal, as if something hard had recently been pried into it. The screwdriver fit into the keyhole as if it had found an old friend. I tried to press down. The lock jerked, clanked, and sprang back. Stupid, I said to myself. Turn around, Ethan. Come back in the morning with the boss. Let him look at his mushrooms and chains himself. And at that very moment, as if in response to that decision, something ran down the hallway inside. Or so it seemed to me. Light, very light footsteps, as if barefoot. And again, a barely suppressed chuckle, short and fleeting. I stood up, grabbed the screwdriver with both hands, and hit the lock from above. It swayed, something cracked in the wood nearby, but the chain remained in place. I stepped back, exhaled, grabbed the steel of the lantern, and hit the arch again, this time not trying to be quiet. On the third blow, the lock flew out along with the bracket. The door was pushed inward by wood swollen with moisture, and a dusty, cold draft came from the opening as if from a basement. Inside, there was silence. The flashlight picked out yellowish spots, a long corridor with linoleum swollen in waves. Doors on the right side, 1, 2, 3 on the floor. A thin jump rope scattered about, a wooden pyramid without tops, a plastic soldier with a broken arm. The smell was dry, with a sticky note of rotten fabric and also a sweetish note, like very old powder that is no longer used. I grimaced. I walked slowly. The flashlight floated along the walls, and the reflections of the old varnish flashed with black gaps of windows covered with plywood. Sometimes the lantern caught my footprints in the dust, dark ovals of soles clear as prints, and next to them, smaller, almost weightless traces left not completely but as if printed by the edges of my feet. I stopped and bent down. The footprints led forward to the third door on the right. The sign above the door still read, Room 3. I pushed it open. Inside was an oblong hall with 2 rows of iron beds, thin with mesh, mattresses directly on springs. The fabric on them had turned into gray foam, matted from age. There was a passage between the beds, and on one of the mattresses closer to the window lay something that looked like a book. I walked over. It was a diary, a thick notebook with a blue cover and glued-on stars. One star had come unstuck and was hanging on the translucent glue. I picked up the diary. My fingers immediately became dusty as if I had reached into flour. On the first page, in calligraphic adult handwriting, it said, "If you find this, don't throw it away." And the date was 1995. Below were several children's names written in slanted round letters with tails sticking out from the U's. I smiled involuntarily. This type of writing with widely spaced vowels and comments in the margins. Rachel lies. I'm the best at the rope. Miss Carol is angry. The entries went on day after day. Rain, competitions, scary stories around the campfire, someone's breakdown in class. At some point, the diary became less of a shared thing and more of a personal thing. The handwriting became smoother. I replaced we. I didn't sleep last night. I heard someone running in the hallway. No one believes me. Today they closed our wing. They said it was mold. We moved. At night you can hear someone laughing. I'm scared. I turned the pages and felt a quiet, gentle emptiness rising from my stomach as if I were rolling headfirst down a soft hill. Probably because it sounded more alive than 30-year-old notes should sound. I reached the end of the notebook, the last pages. The date on the penultimate page was exactly 30 years ago. We left. I'm leaving my diary here. Maybe I'll come back later. And on the next, last page, at first it seemed empty. I was about to close it when the flashlight slipped a little lower and I saw the bottom line written in a child's hand. The date. Today's date. I reread the date several times. It stuck in my mind, not because I couldn't believe it, but because I didn't understand how. I stood there for a second, holding the notebook carefully so as not to smudge it. Then I raised the flashlight higher and read the lines below the date. We're playing hide and seek. They've gone to bed. Someone's coming. He's trying to open the door. He's already here. I froze. Anyone could have written this. Anyone who got here before me. Anyone who saw the beam of light between the boards. Anyone who knew that I walk around the buildings at night. I suddenly saw very clearly how it looked from the outside, an adult with a heavy flashlight standing over strangers' beds with a child's notebook in his hands. I put the diary back and stopped breathing, listening. Something creaked briefly in the hallway, as if the mesh of another bed had taken on a momentary weight and then immediately released it. I went out into the hallway. It was slightly cooler there than in the room. I turned off the flashlight for a second. The darkness became thick, like fabric. In this thick darkness, I heard the faintest sound. A small ball rolling across the linoleum. Click! It hit the wall. I turned on the flashlight and managed to see a tiny glass ball. Either a bead from a bracelet or a ball for a board game. It rolled away from the wall after hitting it and came to rest 2 steps away from me. A shiver ran through my whole body. I stepped forward, shining my flashlight ahead of me. Where the corridor turned, there was a bulletin board on the wall. Under the plastic covered in dust were sheets of paper swollen from moisture. Old schedules, duty rosters, evacuation plans. Someone had traced a word in the dust on the glass with their finger. I knew how to read such marks. Usually children write names, sometimes hello. Here it said, "Don't leave." 2 thoughts came to me, both equally sharp. First, someone is in the building. Second, that someone knows that I will come here today. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as if from static electricity. I took a breath, slowly so as not to listen to my own noise. And then I noticed something I hadn't heard before. A faint, repetitive squeak, very weak, as if it were mechanical. Like a toy sensor, like a cheap timer. The signal was coming from somewhere under the board, from behind a piece of plywood nailed to the wall. I pulled on the edge of the plywood. It was held in place by small, rusty nails and peeling tape. I pried it up with a screwdriver and the plywood fell off. Behind it, in the far corner, a tiny green dot lit up. I reached in and felt something small and square. A Bluetooth speaker. Cheap, light, with a dust-covered mesh. I squeezed it and pressed the button. The squeak disappeared. My heart beat faster. Not from relief, but from the realization that the laughter that had lived within these walls for so long could have come from something so simple, so understandable. I repeated to myself, "Great, great. So it's someone's joke. So someone climbed in at night, plugged in the phone, and turned on the recordings." I didn't want to think about who and why, but the question stuck in my throat like a lump. I put the speaker in my pocket and went back, deciding that there would be no further answers here. In the room with the beds, I went back to the diary. I picked it up and pressed it against the edge of the flashlight so I wouldn't drop it. I didn't want to leave it here. It was too personal, too easy to scare people with. The door, which I had thrown open, was now tightly closed. I grabbed the handle. The wood was wedged against the threshold and wouldn't budge. Outside, pine needles crunched. I already knew that sound, someone walking on pine needles. I pressed the flashlight harder. In the darkness outside the door on the porch, 2 light ovals appeared, as if the rays of another lantern had touched the cracked paint. I didn't move. The ovals shifted and disappeared. I jerked the door, honestly, foolishly, as if force could solve something with the difference in humidity and temperature. It gave way with a jerk, and cool air hit my face. No one was outside. The path to the grove was empty. On the ground were my footprints and another pair next to them. Small, awkward, partially blurred, as if someone in thin socks had stepped where I had. A chill ran down my spine, not because of the footprint, but because I realized that someone had been standing close enough all this time and might have been watching me. I went back. In the guardhouse, I sat down and put my diary on the table. My hands were shaking slightly, as if I had been holding a heavy box for a long time. I opened the last page again. The same date, the same first lines. I turned another page and saw another fresh phrase at the bottom, pressed against the very edge where the paper was rougher. He's gone. Maybe he'll be back tomorrow. And there was no miracle here. I thought that someone from among us who lived in this camp and knew the schedules could have arranged all this. Someone who wanted the old building to become a horror story again. Maybe the teenagers from the older group. Maybe the local kids who climb over the fence every summer. Maybe someone from the staff. The list is endless. In the morning, I gave the diary to the director and showed him the column. He was silent for a long time, then said without looking at me, "I'll take it to the police station." The fire department promised to come and inspect the old wing during the week. Either for mold or for technical reasons. Replace the tape with a new one. Hang a normal, heavy lock. That evening I left, locked the door, and took the diary with me. I thought it was all over, the secret revealed. But a few nights later, the laughter returned. One morning I opened the notebook. On the last page, there was already a new line with a new date and the words, "Come again today." I had the key all this time and the speaker was with the director. So there is someone in the old building after all? Or something, or someone's game has gone too far. Local residents do not go to this lake after sunset. We didn't know this and decided to spend the weekend there, and very soon regretted it. The hustle and bustle of the city gave way to complete silence, which made us want to speak in whispers. We arrived at this lake in Maine closer to sunset. We rolled the trailer onto a flat clearing at the edge of the forest, pulled out folding chairs, and started cooking dinner. The fire burned eagerly when I brought a match to the dry branches. It smelled of fir resin and something metallic from the water. My two friends and I decided to spend this short weekend together. I can't even remember how long we've been friends. Lauren laughed while Haley tried to light another small fire for marshmallows, and I, Ryan, leveled the trailer by placing pieces of wood under the wheels. Everything was simple and right. We had been waiting for this weekend for a long time and hoped to relax and have a good time. By 9 o'clock in the evening, the lake seemed to have closed in on itself. The wind died down completely. The surface of the water became black as glass and reflected our campfire like a tiny sun on the edge of darkness. The forest around us also fell silent, too quiet, as if someone had turned off the background noise. Even the mosquitoes suddenly stopped buzzing. We lowered our voices even though we hadn't intended to. The first scream came so suddenly that I didn't immediately understand what it was. It started as a long breath, then spread into a thin, piercing note, similar to a woman's, but there was something strange about it, as if the throat was stretched too long. Lauren froze with her mug. Haley burned her fingers and dropped her marshmallow stick. "Did you hear that?" Lauren asked. "Yeah, something strange," I said. "Maybe it's some kind of animal, a fox or a coyote." The cry repeated itself closer. The cry was incomprehensible, inhuman, unnatural, and terrifying. My heart skipped a beat. My palms became clammy. I stood up, looking through the gap between the trees. "I'll go check it out," I blurted out, more to sound brave than anything else. "No." Haley grabbed my sleeve. "Are you crazy? In the woods at night? Maybe it's just some local kids playing a prank for sure. Hiding and screaming like in a movie, but who knows? Don't go anywhere." Yeah, Lauren agreed. "As soon as you leave, they'll sneak up and take our food, our cameras. You like to be in control. Stay here, Ryan." I smiled but sat down. The version about local teenagers sounded like a lifeline. It was convenient to hold on to. We moved closer to the fire. Until midnight, we tried to laugh and tell stories, but the laughter broke off, and the stories were not memorable. When we went to bed, I stared at the ceiling of the trailer for a long time and listened to the oppressive silence, as if someone had put their hand on my throat. The morning exploded with electric sun and sparkling water, as if the night had never happened. But as soon as I opened the trailer door, everything turned back. Our chairs were lying on their sides, the charcoal container had been pushed back toward the bushes, and a towel was lying at the very edge. There were footprints on the ground, almost human, except the toes were too long, and the prints had semicircular grooves like claws. "Is this a joke?" Lauren asked, but her voice trembled like someone who already knew the answer. Haley ran her hand over the footprint as if hoping to erase it. "I saw a figure last night, honestly. Over there between the trees, bent over as if its back was broken. I thought I was imagining things." I snorted even though my insides were churning. "Guys, seriously. Claws, figures. Someone came and played a prank on us. Maybe this so-called myth is for visitors. I'm not scared of anything, okay? Let's enjoy the weekend." "Let's just leave," Lauren said quietly. "It feels wrong and uncomfortable here now." "We just got here," I replied too quickly. "Let's at least stay for today. During the day, we can hike around the area, go swimming, and in the evening, we can have another bonfire and heartfelt conversations." We argued. I gave reasons why I thought it was all someone's ridiculous prank, and in the end, we had been planning this trip for so long that nothing could spoil it for us. In the end, I managed to persuade Lauren and Haley to stay for one more night. We walked around the lake all day, took photos, swam, sunbathed, cooked delicious food, and forgot all about what had happened the night before. In the evening, when the sky turned bright orange from the sun slowly setting on the horizon, an old man was walking along the road that stretched along the forest. He was wearing a thick plaid shirt, carrying a cane made of a gnarled branch, and squinting his eyes. He saw us and approached. "Good evening," he said, surprised by our trailer. "Hello," we greeted him almost simultaneously. We invited him to have tea with us and asked if he had heard anything unusual here, and of course we told him what we had heard and seen. We told him, not everything of course, just the basics, about the scream in the tracks, trying to make it sound like a joke. The old man listened, nodding slightly, his lips forming a smirk that revealed several tea-stained teeth. "It's clear that you're not from around here," he finally said. "The locals don't stay overnight here," he said mysteriously. And then he continued. "A boy disappeared in this forest many years ago. A group of people were vacationing just like you. They searched and searched but couldn't find him. His mother went out one night to look for him and never came back either. Some say she left because of grief, others say she stayed here. Since then, people have been disappearing. Several cases a year. I knew right away that you weren't from around here," the old man continued. "Our people don't come here after sunset. You should leave here as soon as possible." There was alarm in his voice and I felt uneasy. "Thank you for your concern," I said with a friendly smile, backing away from the story. "We'll survive," the old man shrugged. "It's up to you." But the sun is already setting. He thanked us for the tea and hurried away, his cane tapping on the tree roots as he slowly walked away. When it got dark for the second time, the forest immediately became unfamiliar, as if we had been thrown out of the boundaries of our familiar world. The wind picked up. We sat inside the trailer, the ceiling light swaying in the wind, the walls creaking. A scream cut through the night so sharply that Haley cried out in response. It was closer on the other side of the clearing. Another followed, short, jagged like a spasm. Then a strange and terrifying laugh. The laugh was not human. It had heavy breathing like asthma and some kind of eerie hoarseness. There was a knock on the trailer door, very politely. Once, twice, 3 times. The 3 of us froze. Another knock, louder this time, and at the same moment, there was a sound like claws scraping against metal. My heart began to beat faster and I held my breath listening. Looking at the girls, I realized that they were terrified by what they had heard. They were both covering their mouths with their hands, and I think that was the only thing keeping them from screaming. Someone pressed against the wall of the trailer, causing the metal to bend and make a metallic clang. "Let's go," Lauren said immediately, in a voice I had never heard her use before. I realized that this had gone too far and we needed to leave before it was too late. I got behind the wheel, turned the key, and silence. The engine didn't respond. The dashboard flashed and went dark. The battery? Or something with the ground? I cursed, looking at my trembling hands. The knocking grew louder. Someone walked along the trailer. The balusters creaked as if someone was leaning on them. Something strange was happening outside. But after 15 minutes, there was silence, as if nothing had happened. "I'm going out," I said. "I'll check the terminal." "You're not going alone." Haley tried to grab me, but I had already put my feet in my boots. The night hit me with the smells of wet bark and iron water. The air was thick and sticky like syrup. The fire had almost gone out. I lifted the hood. The light from my flashlight danced, casting shadows that were too long. The clamp was indeed loose, as if someone had torn it off. My fingers trembled as I tightened it. The seat in the cabin creaked, or was it my imagination? The grass on the right rustled, as if someone were there. "Ryan, hurry!" Lauren whispered from the half-open door. From behind, out of the darkness, came a rustling sound, a crackling branch, and then some kind of animalistic guttural growl. Goosebumps ran down my spine. I felt someone's gaze on me, as if someone was watching us from the darkness. I randomly hit the hood with my palm, and the sound broke the thread of horror. I jumped into the cab and turned the key. The starter spun as if it were choking. Then the engine jerked and came to life. We slammed the doors shut, and the cramped trailer smelled of ozone and dust. Haley looked out the side window and suddenly said quietly, almost calmly, "Look." On the dusty glass outside was a fresh inscription, as if written with a finger. The letters were swollen, childish. "I won't let you leave here." Haley turned pale and, covering the window, fell onto the seat. "Step on the gas, Ryan," Lauren whispered. "Step on it, quick." I pressed the pedal to the floor. The trailer lurched forward. Something outside screamed in a terrifying voice, and immediately there was a blow to the side panel of the trailer, a blow so powerful that it rocked the vehicle. We sped down the forest road as if it were a highway. I barely had time to turn the wheel at the bends. Something flashed in the branches. I only saw the movement of a shadow. The road veered to the right, and at that moment a scattering of pebbles flew out from under the wheels. The trailer skidded, the whole car spun sideways, the headlights swept across the tree trunks, the road, our own tracks, and froze on the dark edge. For a moment everything was quiet, as if we were under a glass dome. Clouds of dust rising in the headlights obscured our view, and when the dust settled a little, she slowly entered the headlights. A girl, if you could call her that. Her torn dress hung in shreds. Her hair was long and sparse, stuck to her temples, her head tilted so that her neck looked as if it was about to break. Her legs were positioned incorrectly, her toes turned inward, her knees bent too sharply. We stared at her, and I was so horrified that I lost my voice. I tried to say something but couldn't make a sound. She looked straight ahead, as if through us, and began to move toward us. She wasn't walking. It was as if she was remembering how to do it, shifting her weight in jerks. The cold crept up my spine. "Step on it, Ryan!" Lauren didn't say it, she shouted it. I pressed the gas pedal. The car roared, small stones flew from under the tires, and this time the road gave way. The headlights slid off her face and jumped onto the trunks, onto the US 1 sign somewhere ahead. We flew out of the forest onto the highway as if from a narrow throat. There was no one on the road, and I pressed the gas pedal as hard as I could. None of us spoke. Fear still paralyzed us. I didn't turn off the high beams or look in the mirrors until a gas station appeared about 40 miles away. Only at the gas station, where there was enough light, did we stop and get out of the trailer. It was completely silent outside, but we didn't want to stay long, so we filled up with gas and drove on. Lauren wiped the creepy writing off the window. Only slightly blurred letters remained. Now we won't be going on a camping trip anytime soon. This story happened to a couple who were driving home late at night on an empty highway. The highway stretched through dark fields. The car hummed evenly and the fuel needle kept sliding toward the red. Tyler leaned over the wheel, peering into the darkness where pale roadside lights flickered now and then, and said, trying to sound casual, "Couple more miles and we'll stop." I saw a gas sign. Ashley nodded without a word. Then she rubbed the cold glass where the black horizon ran and answered, "Let's do it there and take a short break." The station surfaced from the dark all at once, 4 pumps under a low canopy, white lamps spilling a yellowish glow. The store, a glass box with a flickering "open" sign. Behind it, a black void steeped in the smell of dust. Tyler parked at the edge so the pumps in the store stayed in view, as if that mattered. "I'll go pay and grab some water," he said, reaching for his wallet. "Want anything?" "No, just be quick. This place feels off." He smiled and left. The door click sounded too loud. Ashley stayed in the car, tapped her phone. No bars. She sighed and set it on the dash. At that moment, something moved at the far corner of the canopy. A figure peeled out of the shadows and drifted toward their car. The man was average height, dark jacket, a cap throwing his face into shadow. He stopped by the passenger door, leaned in and tapped his knuckles on the glass. Softly, almost polite. Ashley cracked the window a couple of centimeters. Just enough to hear no more. "Evening," he said quietly, like a conspirator. "You headed far tonight?" "Far enough," she answered after a pause. "We're fine, thanks." "Coming back from a trip?" He tilted his head, trying to see inside. "How long's the drive?" 2, 3 hours? You must be tired. I always grab coffee when I'm out late. Coffee's not great here, to be honest." She watched his eyes, too intent, unblinking. Her fingers settled on the window switch. "We'll manage. My husband will be back any second." He smiled with one corner of his mouth, but it never reached his eyes. "Sure, just wanted to ask. You traveling alone?" "Roads are empty and never know. People are different these days and cars break down. That's trouble." Ashley raised the window another notch. The man didn't step back, kept talking. "Your gas was low," he said, flicking his gaze over the dash. "Wouldn't want to stall in the middle of the fields." "I wouldn't go alone, to be honest." "We're not alone," she said firmer. "We're fine." He let his gaze rest on her hands, then straightened. "All right. Don't take it wrong, just making conversation. Long night." Just then, Tyler came back from the store with a bottle of water and a roll of receipt paper. He slowed when he saw the man at the window, and something in his face seemed to please the stranger. The corner of the man's mouth lifted a little higher. "Problem?" Tyler asked. "No," the other voice softened. "Just wished your lady a safe drive. Road's as empty as a graveyard tonight. Take care." He backed away, took 2 steps without breaking eye contact with Tyler, then turned and slipped his hands into his pockets, unhurried, vanishing into the stripe of shadow between the pumps. Tyler went around the car and slid behind the wheel. "What did he want?" Tyler asked, buckling in. "Where we're from, how far home is if we're traveling alone," she listed. "He was odd," Ashley added. "Yeah, Let's go. They rolled off the lot slowly, tires whispering over dust. Once they cleared the light, Ashley looked back. By the far curb in the dark sat an old pickup with dull paint and a dented fender. A second later, the driver's door slammed and the familiar figure slipped inside. Headlights flared and fell in behind them. "He's following," she said, squeezing the belt tighter than usual. "That strange guy." "I see him," Tyler said. "Maybe he's just going the same way." The highway was monotonous and mute, black fields blending into the sky, and only the lane markers, white ticks, kept rising from the dark like a metronome. The pickup held its distance. Not so close you could call it a chase, not so far you could forget it. A splinter you couldn't stop feeling. 2 miles on, the pickup blinked a turn signal and slipped right onto a side road, sinking into the low ground, disappearing into the dark. Tyler let out a loud breath. "See? Just a coincidence." Ashley nodded, but her eyes never left the mirror. They drove another half-mile. The dashed line ran like ribbon. Then way back in the mirror, 2 lights flickered to life. Timid dots at first, then brighter. The same headlights. Too familiar a height, too dim for a modern car. They were closing. "No," Ashley said quietly, not objecting, stating a fact. "He's back there again." Tyler threw a quick glance. His hands on the wheel moved sharper now. "I'll hold 65 if he pulls even with us. Tell me." "I don't want to look back." "Then look at me." She watched his profile, a tense jawline like someone trying to ride out pain. The tire noise grew louder. Maybe they'd hit coarser asphalt. Ashley's phone still read "no service." The pickup drew closer. Less than a car length now. Then he did exactly what they dreaded. Edged right, almost touching their bumper. For a breath, a soft nudge like a shoulder in a crowd, then back into his lane, but still there. "Damn," Tyler said evenly. "All right, if this is a game, I'm not playing." He eased on more speed. The needle crept to 70, then 75. The road ahead ran straight, but a sign flashed an S-curve warning up ahead. The pickup's lights seemed to wake up and quicken. He slid closer again and gave another gentle tap, a little harder this time. The car skated right for a heartbeat. Ashley grabbed the door handle, though she knew it wouldn't help. "Tyler!" Ashley cried. "Hold on tight." Tyler answered steady. He pushed for a gap, threading between the rare bends and the black strip of shoulder. The pickup seemed ready for it and pressed harder. A few oncoming cars sliced past, leaving white arcs of light and a brief ringing in the night. A sign warned of a sharp left. Tyler bled down to 70, took the turn without jerking the wheel. The pickup stayed glued to their tail. Beyond the bend came a short rise. At the crest, the road opened for a second. You could see both sides at once. Tyler went for it, pressed the pedal for a few seconds. The car stretched out, the engine dropping into a lower, fuller note, and the pickup fell back. Its headlights vanished for a moment in the dip. "Got it," he exhaled. "Got it." For the first time in minutes, Ashley pulled her eyes off the mirror and looked ahead. Out there, like salvation, a distant glow was forming. Maybe a crossroad, maybe a farm light. Any light was a promise. But in the mirror, the headlights flared again. Closer than they should have been. As if he wasn't bound to the same road. As if he knew a shortcut. No, nothing mystical. Just a local who knew where a service lane cut behind the brush or where the shoulder could be bounced over. The pickup lunged up behind them, half a car length off, nosed closer and flicked his high beams cocky. Tyler hit the horn. Pointless. "If he tries to pass, I'll slide right," he said. "Just hold on and don't look at him." The pickup swung left halfway into oncoming and for a second ran even. Ashley saw the shape lifting in the cab. The same man, cap, dark jacket. Then he snapped back in and bumped their bumper again. Tyler, answering in kind, chose a moment between 2 gentle bends. Where the shoulder was wide and flat, let the car drift a touch right, then snapped back left to buy a few extra yards. The tires scraped gravel, the car rocked but held. The pickup lost tempo for a heartbeat, enough for them to pull ahead again. "We'll make it to the lights," Tyler said, more to himself. "There's something there." The glow ahead thickened, still far. They sped past a lonely bus stop with no shelter, just a post with a sign and a black turnoff to a dirt road. Wind hissed through the gaps in the doors. Ashley clenched her purse strap until her nails bit skin. A gap opened between them and the pickup. 2 car lengths, then 3. It felt like they'd won. Though one sounded ridiculous on a night like this. Tyler dropped his shoulders a fraction, nodded to himself, checked the gauges. And right then in the mirror, lights flashed again. Higher this time, as if the pickup had bounced over something, and closer, like it was closing by leaps. "He won't let up," Ashley said evenly, without hysteria. "He seemed off back at the station." Tyler said nothing. Ahead, the glow stretched, a smudged patch on the horizon that you drove toward simply because it looked like safety. He kept the speed, added a little on the straights. Behind, the pickup's lights drifted back half a length, then stuck to the bumper again, brushing them with a shadow like a cold hand through fabric. The road was empty. The fields on both sides looked scorched flat. The tire noise softened. The surface changed, and a dry hiss of air leaking through the seams joined the steady hum. Ashley's phone still showed no service, trembling faintly in her hand. She stared only forward so she wouldn't see the 2 lights in the mirror that refused to go away. The glow grew denser, forming shapes, first a few light poles, then a sign with white letters gone dim for the night, a wide turn into a lot. The shoulder toward the light was strewn with litter and black patches of old oil. Beyond that, a long canopy over pumps where 2 cars moved, and a glass box of a 24-hour store. On the far side of the lot, a low motel building with warm windows, an empty lobby, and a drinks machine by the door. The pickup followed them right to the turnoff, and when they cut hard toward the exit lane, didn't copy the move. It stayed on the main line and swept past without slowing. Its headlights slashed their side window for another second, then thinned and went dark down the highway. No horn, no gesture. Just a tail of red lights that flicked once over a bump. Tyler stopped at the edge of the lot, facing the canopy. The engine idled. The hood trembled with a fine, barely visible shiver. They sat in silence until their breathing evened out. In the mirrors, only the lot's light and slow silhouettes of strangers who looked surprised by nothing. The pickup was nowhere. "Do we keep going?" Tyler asked, leaving the engine on. His hands still trembled a little on the wheel. Ashley looked at the motel's light, the people by the pumps, then at Tyler. "I don't want to go back into the dark. Let's stay here till morning." Tyler gave a short nod as if confirming a thought that had already formed. "Agreed. We'll get a room now. In the morning, we move on." He killed the engine. For a few seconds, they heard only the tick of cooling metal. They got out without looking back and crossed the lot, under the steady lamps, with the murmur of footsteps and the faint hiss of the lights overhead. Behind the counter, the clerk glanced up and nodded by habit. Keys on a thick fob with a number dropped into a palm with a pleasant weight. The room was simple. 2 lamps, a patterned bedspread, a window facing the lot. Beyond the glass, the gas canopy, imperturbably white as a sheet. Light seeped through the curtains, warmer than the night. Nothing came from the road but the steady background of the distant highway. A hum you could mistake for wind. Ashley lifted the edge of the curtain with 2 fingers. The same 2 cars stood by the pumps. At the far end of the lot, someone wrestled a suitcase from a trunk. The highway, empty. They didn't talk about the morning. Their things stayed in the car. The keys lay on the nightstand. Water ran in the bathroom. On the nightstand, a green LED on an old clock blinked, counting seconds to dawn. The pickup had gone on down the road. They stayed here till morning,